We always say seat time is king, so sit on down and listen in to Motorsports Tech Talk with your hosts, Brian and Eric. Eric, how's it going?
It's going all right. Usual work and stuff. Uh, kind of a generic weekend, but you had a exciting one, right?
Yeah, it was racing at Mid-Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Good track.
Second event of the year for NASA Great Lakes. So, yeah, it was. I was after my, I don't know, kind of slightly disappointing NCM, and just in that I didn't feel like I improved from the last race, which was the last race of last season, and was NCM as well. So I had some good finishes out there, and then just not as good this time. So, and with the diff change and everything, it didn't really seem to help there. If anything, I think it was within like a tenth of my fastest lap, and so it just it didn't feel like I got any faster, and a bunch of people did get faster. So, but sometimes that's how it goes. But I kind of went into this one with much lower expectations, whereas NCM I had higher expectations, and then it was a flip flop where I just the car was hooked up.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
It
good flip flop.
Yeah, so in the in between the races, there really wasn't too much to do on the car. It was pretty good to go. I did a couple things to try to help improve the power a little bit, because that was my kind of biggest complaint. And so a couple of things I looked at was I replaced my PCV valve because I noticed a ton of oil in the intake area, in the intake hose. And when you mix oil with air and fuel, you basically have like a octane reducer.
I thought it was a booster. It's less likely to knock, right?
It's basically it doesn't burn like gasoline does, so it's
Right.
kind of it's resistant to knocking, but it kind of causes the, I don't know, just my understanding is it's not good for, it's either replacing fuel basically and almost being like void space in that reaction, or it's I remember a while back someone telling me how they over time they had a lot of oil in their intercooler, and it was kind of creating some weird knock issues, and they took their intercooler off and like dunked it in like mineral spirits and stuff for like a week, and then drained it out, and it solved some knock issues he was having. So based on that principle, I feel like it's not good for combustion.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't aid the combustion. So,
but because there was quite a bit, I think part of it was overfilling. I usually I make sure it's up to the fill line, but sometimes I just top it off a little more. Make sure I always have oil in the pan during the corners and everything. But it doesn't seem like the Mazda, the Miata doesn't really have issues with oil pressure in corners. It does. They did a pretty good job from the factory.
Mm-hmm.
And so one, I made sure it wasn't overfilled anymore, and then also I replaced the PCV valve, and that seemed to, like, a lot of times it would leak a little bit out of the valve cover gaskets and the oil cap and stuff like that, and it was bone dry all weekend. So
nice.
That seemed to help. I went to 93 octane over 89 just because if there was any knock issues, I wanted to make sure that was kind of fixed a little bit there. Put new spark plugs in, nothing crazy there, of course. But while I did do that, I did do a leak down test, and found that it was kind of, it's a little hard to do it kind of by yourself in with the engine installed, to hold that that wrench on the crank to keep it in position when you have 100 psi on it.
Yep.
So I don't know, the results were somewhere between, they were basically exact for every single cylinder, but it was like between 7 and 11%. So I'd say somewhere in the middle there.
Okay.
For every cylinder. So, just a little tired.
Yeah, and if memory serves from, our engine thing, that's where we talked about it being, maybe you don't want your race engine there, right? If you're high mileage road cars there and sort of whatever, you're probably fine. But
Hmm.
when you're trying to get everything out of it, that's tired, right? That's you
Yeah.
want to fix that now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it tells me is that because they were all exact, it tells me that the engine, I think, was rebuilt and built for Spec Miata. Because usually with an older engine, you're gonna have like weird numbers, one to the next,
Mm-hmm.
different carbon buildup, different wear on the cylinder walls sometimes, and then
Yeah, there's like a
a
temperature gradient generally, like through the cooling jacket, right?
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
one of the cylinders gets hotter, and yeah,
Yeah, so there's a lot of different factors can create kind of uneven. So this, I feel like it was definitely rebuilt. It's just yeah, it was a long time ago. I mean, there's stickers on the car from race wins that it was a part of in 2008. So
nice.
it's who knows when they last put in an engine in it, but it could have been as late as that, and or as long ago as that, if not, way before that. So, but yeah, so it seemed to help a little bit, all those little tweaks, but then I also focused on the suspension side. I found something weird with my little angle o-meter for doing camber,
Mm-hmm.
where if you flip it upside down, it reads differently.
That certainly doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it could be just that the where I'm doing my alignment isn't exactly level. I try to find the most level part of the garage that I can, but I'm not ever super exact with everything.
Yeah, I guess what are you using for a camber gauge, and then what are you using to make sure all the pads are level, if anything, for that?
I mean, yeah. So basically, I just I have hub stands, and then I have a little intercomp kind of digital angle gauge.
Okay.
It's like magnetic,
Yep.
the little cube. And yeah, I think it's just that it's just a little unlevel. So, but what I found, and what I should do is put it on some sort of floor tiles or something to try to level out the whole car. But it's also not just the car, but like I think there's local unlevelness areas in the on the concrete too. So,
Yeah. So the hub
but
stands aren't sitting on anything besides the ground.
no, yeah, they're just on the ground. So
Okay.
not perfect or ideal or by any means, but better than nothing.
Yeah.
but for the most part, I mean, I try to, although I haven't gotten to do it too often, too many events, but I try to, uh, use tire temps to ultimately figure out if the camber I'm running is kind of what I think it is or should be.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's kind of setting it as close as I can, and then if I need to make some slight adjustments at the track. But I haven't really been able to do that feedback loop too often yet. So I'm hoping I just got a new tire pressure and temp gauge, so use that a little more often.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I found that, and what I found with it is that when I flip it, I basically just started taking kind of the average reading between them.
Okay.
And it seemed to work a lot better in that it turned like basically it I was able to find that the left rear had a lot less camber than I was expecting, and I had a lot of problem with right-handers at NCM.
Okay.
So it seemed to, by doing the averaging, like basically if you flipped on the one side, if you flip it over, it would drop, it would basically reduce the camber, and then on the left side it would increase it, or it was reading higher than it should have been. So
Okay.
um, ultimately I was running more camber on the right side than I was on the left side by quite a bit, by at least like a degree and a half, I think.
That's
So
very substantial.
yeah, so I kind of, yeah, basically I moved it so now it's point 0.7 off the right side and point 0.7 onto the left side, so then they basically evened out then,
Mm-hmm.
about roughly. So that seemed to be a huge improvement at Mid Ohio. And then I also
Good.
took a little camber off the front also to kind of help with the balance because again I was really oversteery, and short of just disconnecting the rear roll bar, I'm already full soft. So I'm kind of I'd like to still have the help of that rear anti roll bar, at least doing something,
Sure.
and save the disconnecting for like the rain.
Right.
But yeah, no, it really helped, and yeah, it got the temps pretty even front to rear, and the balance was very good. It would push in some of the low speed stuff and be a little bit loose in some of the high speed, but it was way more stable in the high speed, especially, which there's quite a few of it at Mid Ohio. Turn one,
Yep.
and then kind of going into Thunder Valley. That one's pretty, and then coming out of Thunder Valley, all
Yep. Definitely.
all fast corners. So yeah, the car felt really good. I also changed out my sway bar end links because they had a lot of play in them, so that could have kind of made some kind of weird feeling handling at times, somewhat. If anything, it's just what I like about these ones is they have cotter pins, so you can really quickly do adjustments, basically.
Okay.
So you don't have to like unbolt, because the ones I had before were like, it was using these bushings that were, I don't know, they were worn out, so the bolt was almost threaded into the bushing. It was like a bronze bushing,
Yeah.
and it was like threaded through the bolt was going through the end link and then into the sway bar, but it had some bushings on it to space it out, and those were basically threaded in and didn't have a hex on them or anything, so you had to like get a vice grip, and it's just,
Yeah. Sounds like a pain.
it wasn't ideal. So yeah, if it's about to rain and you need to make a really quick adjustment, it was basically it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So I fixed that, and then made it potentially a little more less slop is always good. So and then the last thing I did was some steering rack spacers, which are NASA legal, and it's basically it's helping with bump steer in super slammed Miatas.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely, I did feel like it felt a bit better, like over curbs, stuff like that. Like it felt a little more kind of stable in that sense too. And it could have, I'm not exactly sure which, how bad the bump steer problem is without it, but I imagine that could also help with front tire temps as well, by having less of that toe change, potentially, but I'm not 100% sure, because I felt like a lot of times it seems to grease over the front tires during the race, and I didn't feel like I had that this time. So,
Okay.
but that could also be me not, being, because the car was set up better, I didn't have to push it as hard to keep it, keep decent lap time. So anyway, ultimately, altogether, I go out for the practice day, or not practice day, the warm-up session on Saturday, and car's feeling pretty good. I set a half decent lap. It's kind of important to set a good lap in the warm-up, because that's determines your qualifying kind of grid position.
Okay.
Because if you don't, then you're just stuck behind a bunch of slower guys that you have to get around before you can try to set your lap.
Right.
So if you can set a quick one that's also competitive with the other Spec Miatas, then you can kind of be in a group with them, and that's always nice to try to get a toe off of one of the other guys, or
Mm-hmm.
at least use them as a benchmark, kind of.
Right.
But I go out in qualifying, and car's feeling good. I set a lap that was 1.1 seconds faster than last year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
In the club course, so it was a big improvement. The conditions were pretty good. It was a cooler day, and definitely good for fast laps, but wasn't, I don't think it was that much different than the last time. I think it was a little warmer last time I was there, but nothing crazy. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. But as I'm coming in through the lap, I noticed my clutch getting kind of softer and softer.
Okay.
Which it was funny when it first started doing it. I was like, oh, that's probably a problem. I must be leaking somewhere. I'll fix it before the race. But as it was getting softer, I actually kind of liked it because it moved the engagement point all the way to the floor, basically, and
Okay.
it made it made the shifts like a lot smoother because it was just either easier to time. It was more consistent. Like I push it. You know, like as soon as I'm releasing, it's grabbing.
Right.
Uh, and I don't know, I really liked it. So I was like, well, whatever's happening, I need to fix it, but I should try to set it better, like closer to this.
Yeah. Do that
Um,
next time.
but yeah, I come in, I see I'm second, which I think was my best qualifying, at least result. Yeah, I've started second before, but it was because someone else had an issue, and I started third and moved up to second.
Okay.
So with so many people there and some really fast guys and everything, I was surprised to say the least. But as I pull up and I was going to try to take some tire temps
Mm-hmm.
and pressures right there before going to the scales. That's when the clutch just went to the floor and there was just nothing left.
Okay.
So I was like, so first thing I was like, I need to get to the scales because I don't want them to invalidate my time.
Right.
And then I have to figure out how to fix this. So Megan and one of the other guys that was taking temps for one of the other cars, they pushed me. I was like, just get me going so I can get in the first gear,
Mm-hmm.
which it worked, you know, and then went up to the scales, but there were some people in front of me, so I had to stall it as I rolled up. And then they were like, come on. They kept like waving me. I was like, push me.
Yeah.
So yeah, they pushed me up, and then so I got through that, and then went on to the task of figuring out what happened, and it turned out it was a blown soft line. So like there's the hard line that goes from the master cylinder, basically to the soft line, and the soft line goes from there to a hard line that then goes to the slave cylinder,
Mm-hmm.
and has that weird like loop-de-loop kind of part of
Yeah.
it in it.
Yeah. It's coil. It's pretty odd. But
Yeah, so that burst, just the soft part burst, so not too surprising, but you know, didn't expect it to happen, and
right.
of course, no one had a spare. That's one thing that just people didn't really hang on to, I guess.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find one at any auto parts stores, so I there was a Miata parts kind of seller there, and they had a braided clutch line, full braided from the master to the slave. And at first I wasn't sure if if it's legal or not for Spec Miata. What I should have done right away is just looked at the rules, and it is legal. Because I saw he had that, and I was like, okay, I'll remember that. And then I went to the auto parts store, didn't find it, and then came back. So if I would have just taken that right away, it would have been fine. But of course, all weekend, all of our sessions were like really close together.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Like we were done by like 2:00 every day. Which is nice for leaving the track, because we got home by like 6:00 dinner time, so that was nice.
Yeah.
But it wasn't nice for race one when I had like 2 hours to find the part and then replace it in the pit area. So finally I went with the braided line, but I couldn't get it to bleed. Like we were bleeding it for like maybe 20-30 minutes or something. Like just Megan's in the car and she's doing exactly what she needs to do, but it's just like it'll just barely push out fluid, and it just goes to the floor, had no feeling. I can't even see. I'm watching the slave cylinder; it's not moving at all.
Yeah.
And so I ended up rerouting because I had routed the braided line basically right exactly where the stock line was, which goes kind of over the engine along the firewall.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I ended up doing is, one of the other guys pointed out, like, oh, you probably have a huge air bubble, like in that whole entire length of that line, basically. And so, and there's just, you can't build up enough pressure with the clutch because it's just such a small bore, and so little stroke and everything. So, and I don't have like a hand vacuum bleeder or anything like that, which I just ordered this week after that.
Yeah.
So I ended up running it basically kind of over the frame rails and over the transmission. So just like tucked it down underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And then it finally bled with like 10 minutes before. So I had to, take all the tools out of everything that was all over the place, throw it over towards the trailer.
Yeah. So
Fuel
just a
it.
mad dash, of course.
Yeah, fuel it. I had to freaking put a new battery in the GoPro because it had died at the very end because I forgot to turn it off after the qualifying session, and you're required by the rules to have video and all that stuff. So it's like mad dash. I like get my suit on and I throw my helmet on, and my gloves and glasses and stuff are kind of loose in the car, and I just drive over to grid, and the Miatas are all leaving at that point. And so I almost didn't get out between, because the 944s, the Spec 944s were leaving right as I went up. And at first they like waved me on and they said stop. And then they stopped the 944s, let me go. So I basically started last in Spec Miata, which was unfortunate because, qualifying second was my best qualifying. And then I didn't get to reap the benefits of it.
Yeah, it's a real bummer.
So yeah, start in the back, which can be more fun. Obviously, you get to pass a lot more people and
right,
less pressure. There's not really going to be any fast guys right behind you. It's just trying to catch the fast guys.
Yeah,
and ended up eighth on the track, and then seventh after I think it was third or fourth got DQ'd for weight. So starting 18th, moving up to seventh was a fun little race. The car felt good. I was able to set the second fastest time during the race, which puts me in second for the actually I guess it was the third, but the guy who got DQ'd was the second fastest, so his lap time was removed, so I ended up starting second for race 2.
Nice.
And then from there, race 2, I just I challenged for the lead on lap 2 or 3, but couldn't. Basically, I went to the outside, going into China Beach.
Okay.
And then I was inside for Madness, but then couldn't hold on to it. I wasn't able to get far enough up through Madness, so I was outside for the next turn, going into like the S's there. So he was able to hold position there. So, and then from there, I just I lost. Then I dropped back to third because I got a bad run coming out of the keyhole, and just he got a good run, and he was able to get me basically the same way I was trying to get the guy in first.
Okay.
And then later I again had another bad exit from the keyhole, and then got passed for fourth, which at that point, I mean, it was still like 20 minutes left in the race, and I felt like I had good long-term pace, so I was just trying to settle in and see if I could put some pressure on him. But a full course caution came out for oil down, and I believe it was the keyhole, and some cars were off track and all that stuff. So that race ended on a caution, and I was in fourth, which is still a good result. But starting second, doesn't feel the best.
Yeah, it sucks to move backwards.
Yeah.
Like if you had fought up to fourth, like from that first race, it'd be just wonderful, right? You'd be throwing yourself a party. And then here, you just still get fourth, but you went the other direction, and it's just more upsetting.
Yeah. So, but still a good result. Can't be too upset about it. And then I was starting second again for race 3, so that was good. So race 3, last race of the weekend, and I tried to challenge around the outside going into China Beach at the start, but just kind of filing behind first. Try to see if I can stay on him, try to gap third a little bit. There's then a caution. There's then a yellow coming into 1, basically on the inside of 1. Someone blew up or something, blew up their engine or had a transmission issue or something. So as I'm coming up, I'm right behind first, and I don't see the yellow flag until basically the turn-in point, and it just throws me off a little bit, just a little bit, where I see the yellow, and I see the car off, and he was all the way off on the inside, like in the pit lane almost. So like it wasn't a dangerous situation, but as soon as you see the yellow, you want to see if because there could easily be someone spun in the middle of the track come exiting one.
Yeah, I mean, until you identify it, you don't know where the the incident or whatever it is. So
Yeah, exactly. And also in front of me, the Adam in first, he kind of bobbled a little bit too. So it's like, I don't know. I just it was just a tiny bobble, but that got Camden, who was behind me in third. He just got a really good run out of one, got alongside me in the keyhole, and then was able to just kind of. We were alongside exiting the keyhole, but he was just able to get a better run out of it, and he was by. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I had a pretty good gap to fourth at that point. We were kind of we were running out in clean air, and there was a little scuffling going on behind us, so we were able to get a pretty good gap at that point. And so I was just gonna settle in, go for the podium, see if they were challenging each other in front of me. So I was like, yeah, I'll keep with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know, I just started hitting some really slick parts of the track, and it just seemed strange because it was just kind of coming out of nowhere. And then a few corners later, Adam pulls off, and apparently his diff failed. It might have oil could have been from him. It could have been from someone else's. I'll get to in a second. But it was really slick, and we were all like kind of slipping and sliding around. And then he pulled off once he felt that there was something definitely wrong with the car.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I'm up to second, and then we're coming. Then that was going into Thunder Valley. We start the next lap. I kind of get a good run coming at turn one to close back the gap because I lost a bit slipping on that oil. And yeah, I'm coming up to the keyhole, and like the last second I see this like huge oil slick on the racing line, kind of the outside of the keyhole, in the brake zone.
Okay.
And I see it basically right as I start braking, and I, immediately it locks up, and I see Camden in front of me. He's locking up and sliding all over the place.
Yeah.
But luckily I was able to kind of edge the car to the inside a little bit away from the oil slick. So I go sideways. He kind of loses it and slides off the track into the kind of sand trap area, but keeps it moving.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I was able to keep it on the track, like barely, which was, scary because there's two cars already in the sand trap that had slipped on the oil. So it's like,
So, but this wasn't yellowed. Like all these cars are going off, there's oil, but it's not yellow.
There was a local yellow in that corner that had like just came out.
Okay.
So it was yellow zone. So, technically no passing, but I think when someone leaves the track, you're allowed to pass them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Is my understanding. So yeah, basically I stayed on. He wasn't able to. And as soon as I come out of the keyhole and I look at the, the kind of start flag stand that's on the back straight, that they put out the double yellow. So I'm like, ooh, well, I got the lead here. There's a ton of oil down. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
I wasn't super confident it was going to go back green. And if it did, it would be like a one lap kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, just like 5 pace laps later, they checker flagged it and got the win.
There you go. Yeah, well, in those last lap green laps are, from the series perspective, it's not wise, right? It's kind of fun. It can be a crazy time, but
Yeah.
you bunch everybody up and say, okay, you got one lap to make it happen. There's a lot more stupid moves when they do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're all on a time limit. There's other races and sessions and stuff afterwards, so it's they can try to extend it. But yeah, I agree. Like the last lap sprints are always where I think the most contact happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would have liked to maybe do one more lap just to, assuming that I was able to stay ahead during that lap, of course. But hey, it wins a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just had to put myself in that position to, take advantage of other people's mistakes and misfortunes in this case with mechanical failure and all that stuff. But it's all part of racing. Yeah, but
I mean, absolutely it is. And I know some people who sometimes aren't as happy when it's a win under yellow or something. But like you said, it's part of racing. Like if you talked about someone else getting a failure, well, if your clutch line hadn't blown, and you had started in second, maybe that would have been the race win. So it's it's not a negative in my mind, right? That is racing, and that's you made it happen. So you could have gone off track when you hit the oil, right? But at the end of the day, you came back first under the checkered. So
yeah, and it's my second win in Spec Miata, so that's always exciting, and first win at Mid Ohio. So Mid Ohio is definitely one I wanted to get a win at. There's a lot of opportunities too in the NASA season, but yeah, getting one this early is nice. So yeah, now I kind of set a little goal, like to try to see if I can get a win at each track that we go to. So that leaves Pitt, Gingerman, and Audubon now. So we'll see. Those are a little later in the season.
Yeah. Well, you have plenty of practice at Gingerman, so I expect you to make it happen. No pressure.
Yeah, Gingerman honestly is the only one that matters. That's the one I want to win. I don't really care as much about the others. It's more Gingerman.
Yeah. It's the greatest track in the world.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's like the beacon of time attack for the entire United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's the benchmark. It's the track everyone wants to hit a fast lap on. So yeah, it's but anyway, so yeah, really good weekend. And also like it's always a good weekend when you don't hit anything or anyone or anything like that, and don't break anything major as far like the car's basically ready to go for the next race. Other than I'm going to put a whole new engine in it, but that's besides the point.
That's not major at all.
But yeah, no, it was good, and yeah, I mean, I guess sorry for this long-winded explanation, but yeah, a little more to talk about this time, I felt like, and
yeah,
I was pretty proud of it and everything, but yeah, I mean, following that, I thought, maybe this week we have a little shorter episode, and I kind of just talk about why I chose to do Spec Miata and why I feel like it's a really good place to be in racing, and talk about the differences, the difference between like NASA, SCCA, and then some of the more national events and stuff like that. Because Miata is always the answer, and
it's true.
And Spec Miata is also always the answer.
Also true.
But I don't know. I guess to start, like one thing that's kind of unique about Spec Miata is it's the only class that is common between SCCA and NASA. They all have, like NASA has like Thunder Roadsters, and SCCA has Spec Racer Fords, and so they all have like similar looking things that kind of fill each niche. But as far as Spec Miata, it's the only one that's that's in both. So right off the rip, it gives you a lot of opportunities to race in a lot of different events, regional and national, and the rule sets are very close. There's a few small little changes, like for one, those steering rack spacers. Technically, they're only allowed in NASA and not SCCA, so I'd have to take those off if I want to race in SCCA.
Okay.
Although there could be a change coming up eventually. I know there's been there were talks at one point. They like to try to combine them as much as they can, but anyway, a couple just small little changes between the two. But for the most part, you bring your tech your car at NASA, you should get through it in SCCA and be rules legal and everything. So that's pretty nice. I know around here that gives you access to some more tracks. Like NASA doesn't run like Groton or Waterford, which are kind of a little more local, especially Waterford to us.
Yeah.
So it gives you the opportunity to race there, and then just anywhere, any track gives you more opportunities to race at those tracks that they both go to. So yeah, that's always important, being able to have access to more events, more tracks. But so then that leads me to my kind of next point, and I think kind of one of my favorite things about it is the support that Mazda gives to racers, especially Spec Miata racers. They have a contingency program, so you sign up for it, and based on how you finish, whether it's in kind of the big national events like Hoosier Super Tour and stuff like that, or even just within your regional championship, stuff like that, they'll give you basically cash based on how you finish. Of course, if you finish well. So that's nice. They also give you parts discounts and kind of a direct way to order OEM parts, which is also very nice. You don't have to go through the dealerships or random online sellers and stuff. You just go right to Mazda and they send you stuff pretty timely, and prices are good. It's free shipping if you spend $900. So that's pretty.
Wow. What a deal.
That's pretty good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, when you put that $10 gasket or, a couple bolts in the cart, you're like, oh, only 890 to go before I get free shipping. Easy.
Yeah, you might as well do it,
Just throw a transmission in there.
Yep.
Or something. But
Easy.
But yeah, so
and they
but yeah.
That's one of the reasons they downsized their pro racing efforts, right? Was so they could have more money for amateur and grassroots level racing.
Yeah, they had the 2 Daytona prototypes, and they kind of reduced it to just one. And yeah, part of their reasoning is to not have to take away from and kind of bolster those kind of club racing programs that they have. So and amateur stuff. So yeah, it's really good to see. I mean, it's cool seeing the big cars and the big Mazda team race and stuff, but ultimately I think it's probably the right call, because they can get a lot more people interested in the brand, I think, for a longer period of time through the kind of club racing, Global MX5 Cup, all those kind of things, where I think it's not that many less people watching and more people kind of doing, right. Kind of building that more direct connection with the brand. So but yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see them do that, and it's really helpful to have that support. So, I think some other brands were catching on a little bit recently, but overall, Mazda definitely has the best program for that.
Yeah.
So it's that's really nice. Let's see, and then also what's really nice is just, for the most part, the cars are pretty reliable.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're pretty simple. They're low power, but they're also really nice for racing. They have double wishbone front and rear suspension. Basically a Formula One car. I mean,
pretty much. Yeah, I don't see a difference.
No difference. No push rods, but direct acting dampers are way cooler anyway.
Yeah, they are.
None of this remote damping,
You know what?
Belt cranks and everything.
Push rods and rockers are just more parts, which is heavier. So, if you want to give some F1 teams a bit of advice, just tell them to ditch that whole thing. Lose the weight, Miata style. Makes sense.
Yeah, so if anything, Miata's more racy,
Yeah, exactly. I'd buy it. I just sold myself. I believe that.
But yeah, I mean, it's no McPherson strut here, although McPherson strut's pretty good, but especially when it's in the front and rear of a Cayman.
Yeah, buddy.
But or a Mitsubishi
Or a
Starion, can't forget that. Yeah. Um, but yeah, double wishbone's pretty nice. Good camber curves. I think we talked about that a long time back. Maybe one of our first episodes.
Yeah, it was like the first or second or just third. I don't know,
Like,
somewhere around there. Pretty
yeah,
early.
I think our first tech episode was about camber,
Mm-hmm.
where we touched a little bit about that. But yeah, I mean, it's got a good layout for doing track things. It's small, it's light, which helps reduce your consumable cost.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's reliable. It's not a lot of power, so a lot. It's a lot harder to get into trouble, though you're still going fast as hell through the corners and everything. So it's not like it doesn't really feel slow when you're out there. I'm sure if I would get out of that car and get into like a GT3 car, then I'd be like, oh god, this is really slow.
Yeah. I
Or
mean, you could
if I,
probably get into a TCR car and think it's real slow, but I get what you're saying. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean when you're at the limit going through every corner, it feels fast.
Yeah.
It's just that limit is a little lower than it would be for some crazy, expensive race car. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then speaking of costs, like the cars are relatively cheap. They made like 6 billion of them. They're all over the place. You can find them as far as street cars to build them from, but also because there's a ton of people in the class, there's plenty of pre-built cars, which is definitely the recommended way to go when you're first starting into it, because I mean there's usually a very significant cost savings. The roll cage alone can cost a couple grand, 3-4 grand, and sometimes you can get these cars for 5 to 10 in that range. Kind of the
You can also get them for like 45. So,
yes. So, but still, I mean, in racing, a $45,000 car, that's like ready to go, that won nationals that year, doesn't sound absolutely horrifying, but for me who spent less than 10 on mine, then that does sound horrifying.
yeah. Well, you also
But
have to remember yes, it's racing, but it's also a Miata. I love Miatas, but come on, bro. That is
yeah,
so much fucking money for a fucking Miata.
no, it is pretty ridiculous. Fortunately, most of the even like good, potentially nationally competitive cars will be in the mid 20s,
Mm-hmm.
with like only like the super high dollar big name kind of cars being in that 30 to I think 40. I don't even know if that was uh,
I don't know if it was the sale
Jim
price, but
Drago.
I saw the $45,000 listing. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he actually sold the car at that price. It was more just like, well, if you want to give it to me, I'll take it, kind of thing, and I'll just build another one.
yeah,
But yeah, for the most part, you can get a pretty decent NB for in the mid 20s. The NA, so first generation Miatas, are going to be a bit cheaper most of the time, especially the 1.6s.
mm-hmm.
1.8s as well. The 1.8s are kind of the NA 1.8s, which is what I have, is kind of this weird no man's land where it's not really, it's not, the 1.6s have, because they can run less weight, and they rev a little higher, it works out at some tracks where it seems to benefit kind of that lower weight car.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas other tracks, you want like the torque from the later VVT cars, or like the kind of Goldilocks just right is the 99 and 2000s, with where they have good top end power, a little better torque with the VIX intake manifold.
Yep.
But then also have all the updates and benefits from going from NA to NB. So
Don't have
it's
pop-ups though.
doesn't have pop ups. So I mean, why even bother with it? So
Yeah, pretty much.
but yeah, so the NA cars are a little usually can be had for much less. There's still some decently higher priced ones that are nicely set up, but for the most part, they seem to be not the most popular. But there's a lot of them out there because balances change. Sometimes one car was better, rules change, that kind of thing. So, and when I don't know when Spec Miata first started, but I imagine VVTs weren't allowed immediately and stuff like that. So, but anyway, but yeah, you can find cars. They're all over. Like go on I know there's like a Facebook page I'm on. It's like Spec Miata Racers Group. There's usually a lot of listings on there. Um, you know, racingjunk.com. I think they usually have some listings there, and Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace sometimes too. Just, it just there's always someone selling a car, so
Yep.
that's definitely the best kind of easiest way to get into it. Although if you get a car that's a little maybe not taken care of, you might end up with a lot of added expense of fixing it.
And the headache that goes along with that.
Yeah, so it's definitely don't buy the cheapest one out there. That's not You're probably gonna end up spending more than a decently sorted, cheaper, but somewhat cheaper one. So yeah, just you get what you pay for at the end of the day. So
Yep.
just kind of look out for that. I guess other things to look out for is I think it was 2 years ago, Spec Miata made the switch from Bilstein shocks to kind of a bespoke Penske made for Spec Miata, and a lot of the older cars that haven't been updated will just still have the Bilsteins, and that's like a $1,200 expense to upgrade it. So factor that in, and any other things that you think. Yeah, if you want to buy one of those sweet $7,000 race engines from one of the big shops or whatever, if your car was 15 grand and you're going to spend 7 on a new engine, then maybe you could have just bought like a 20 grand one that already had one of those engines in it. So, all just things to factor in. To compete regionally, I don't think you need those fancy engines. You just need something that's not, completely worn out. And really, I mean, all they're doing is, they're decking the head and the block to get maximum compression for the rules. They're doing a nice new fresh valve job. They're boring it 10 over to get really good ring seal. All out within the rules, but it's just little things, and they're finessing everything they can. And a lot of times the difference will only be like 2 to 4 horsepower from just a fresh, decently sourced used engine. So when you're racing all cars that are all the same, basically, that can be definitely a huge advantage, especially in the big, highly well attended national events and stuff like that. So, but like I said, I don't think it's needed in regional stuff. So, but something to look out for if you want to kind of move up eventually. So earlier I talked a little bit about NASA and SCCA. The biggest difference between those two is that SCCA uses Hoosier SM, I think 7.5s right now. They might be on SM8s by now, 100%. And then NASA uses Toyo Proxys RRs. So completely different tires, same size, 205, 50, 15s. Mm-hmm. So you can get the one set of wheels will cover you for both. Just the tires are going to be different. And then the rain tires are different too. They use a Hoosier rain in SCCA, and then a Toyo rain in NASA. So
right.
Kind of one of the big reasons I chose NASA was basically because of those tires. The Toyo RRs are very well known for just being able to heat cycle 20, 30 times before they really lose any speed. At some tracks, you can actually benefit yourself from having a highly heat cycled tire. And part of that, I think, my feeling on that, my theory on that, is kind of as you wear that tire down, one, you're reducing your rotational mass, so that's a benefit as you wear it down. But also at a low, it's usually at low grip tracks where it seems to have that advantage. By having that less kind of thermal mass of the tire, it can get up to temp faster. So that's kind of what I feel is what happens there. I mean, so Mid-Ohio is kind of one of those tracks. But yeah, I mean, but what it leads to is just getting tons of tire life. You can keep running a tire. I mean, I've run the same set for 3 events, so 9 races, plus all the qualifying and practice sessions. and had no problem. Didn't really have a drop off in speed as far as I could tell. Like every time I bring some really roasted tires to use up in a practice day and then switch on to the fresh ones for the next day, I hardly ever notice a difference, if not, if anything. Or so it's definitely nice to have a tire that you can just use all of.
Yeah.
Whereas the Hoosier, unfortunately, kind of heat cycle out after 2-3 heat cycles. So maybe you use it for qualifying, you use it for the race, and by then you're basically lost a lot of its. You lost a bit of its performance, which is going to be really needed in the next qualifying, the next day, or in the next race. Which again, if you're just racing regionally, I'm sure you can get away with a couple more heat cycles than that. But if the guy who you're racing against decides that he wants to run a new set every race or whatever, then basically they're going to probably have an advantage over you. So as far as just peak tire grip. So
yeah, so the NASA just kind of hopes you keep those tire costs down and maintain, or still be competitive.
Yeah, basically it's instead of I can do one set for 3 events versus 3 sets for 1 event, which a little exaggerated, but it's definitely a big difference. Of course, the nice thing about the Hoosiers is they are grippier and you get to go faster. They're like 1 to 2 seconds faster depending on the track. So there's that benefit of the Hoosiers. But yeah, as far as having a race competitive tire, you just need to watch out on how many heat cycles you're putting on them. So yeah, that's the biggest difference. That's why I chose NASA. Thing I like about SCCA, which I'm going to try out eventually, is they have, kind of mentioned it earlier, they have the Hoosier Super Tour events. So these are like big, almost basically national level events. It's kind of a separate championship, and at these events you're going to have like 60 to 80 cars at every single one, all the top racers, Spec Miata racers in the country, basically. And but there's the bigger prize pools, bigger contingency, all that kind of stuff. But of course, big competition. So otherwise for NASA, you just have the national championship once a year, but you don't really have kind of any other big marquee events like that, other than the national championship. So SCCA gives you a little more opportunities to do kind of bigger events and racing against more decorated and competitive drivers from all over. Because whenever you expand the pool of drivers larger, you're going to get more really good guys at the top. So yeah, I mean that's one thing I'm definitely looking at to eventually kind of spread into. And of course, and they also go to a lot of the big name pro tracks, so that's always good too. So
yeah.
But yeah, and then I guess on the lines of that kind of cost and tires and those kind of things, and talking about contingency earlier with Mazda, another thing that I believe Hoosier has, but I know Toyo has because I'm in the program right now, but based on how you finish in these races, you can get money towards your next set of tires. And if you're having good finishes, potentially you can not spend a dime on tires for the entire year, and that's a huge benefit for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Some of the cost is because it's sprint racing, and it's just you, and you own the car, and you're driving the car. You can't split it like you split costs like you can in endurance racing, where you have 3-4 drivers, maybe even more than that for long events, where you can split the costs a little easier and the risk and that kind of stuff, as far as having mechanical failure or anything like that. In Spec Miata, you don't have that, but at the same time, you have a little more support on things like tires, brake contingency. Just specifically for Spec Miata, you have Mazda's contingency and that kind of stuff. So, which they have a program for some of the endurance series too, but it's definitely favors the Spec Miata a bit more. So So overall, I mean, it's kind of you can kind of choose how much you want to spend when it comes to Spec Miata.
Yeah.
You just do, if you're competitive regionally in NASA, you can race for relatively cheap. NASA events, they're looking for instructors too, and they'll basically kind of give you credits towards entry fees by if you're an instructor or just volunteering. So you can do that alongside of getting your tire contingency, alongside of getting your Mazda contingency, and you can run your tires, for a lot more races. So that's the low end of the cost, and then the high end is SCCA national championships and Super Tour, and bringing 4 sets of tires to the track, and with your $35,000 car and all that stuff. So the sky's the limit. Although the ceiling is definitely lower than most, or really all pro racing, but still can get pretty high for most normally kind of solo funded people. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean so that's the kind of the main reasons why I chose NASA as well as Spec Miata, and yeah, I've been really enjoying it. I still I love some Champ Car and Lemons endurance racing, and the one thing I like about that is that kind of you get to hang with your boys,
Yeah. Right.
in the race, a little more camaraderie, which I'm starting to find more and more in Spec Miata. Like in the paddock, we're all very friendly, but as I race with people more and get to know them better, you have a little more of that camaraderie as well. So that's nice. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you still want to beat them. So it's
Right. Not too much friendliness.
yeah, there's still that slight awkwardness, right? Where eventually you gotta you know try to do some crazy move around the outside of them, and hopefully not hit them.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, there's definitely still, I mean, my favorite thing about Champ Car is that I could just show up and do it without, you just do a quick little like learning novice class thing, and you're there. You have a driver's license, you have money, you have a car, go do it, you're done. Just way more accessible. Whereas with NASA and SCCA, you have to get a competition license, which can be as easy as doing an SCCA accredited school, or for SCCA, a couple day course, spend like $1,000 or something, and do the class, get your novice permit, and then do some regional events, which will then get you your full license. So, that's the path in the SCCA. Whereas NASA, they have their HPDE program where they want you to progress HPDE 1 through 3. Once you graduate from 3, you can go to 4, or you can go right into comp school. And then once you do comp school, you get your kind of racer's permit. You do, I think it was 6 races. It might be a little 6 or 8 races. And as long as you finish those with no contact, you then get your full license. And then from there, if you have a license in SCCA, you can usually, talk to the chief steward and or the regional director of NASA, and you can usually get a NASA competition license, or the other way around. So, they're kind of flexible there, but it's a little more time and money invested in order to get that competition license. But the flip side is that everyone you're racing with has some sort of credentials.
Right.
So again, it I wouldn't say that every single person I've ever raced with in NASA is better than every Champ Car person I've raced against, just because they have competition license and Champ Car people don't. Of course, there's always crossover. There's people with competition licenses from SCCA and NASA racing in Champ Car, but there's some really good drivers in Champ Car that just really like Champ Car, and that's where they're going to be. So, yeah. But it's nice to know that there is some barrier, I guess, when you're putting your own car out there and you're responsible for fixing it if someone makes a bonehead move. So
Right.
that can be beneficial, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that kind of covers Spec Miata in a nutshell. Is there any thoughts you'd like to add?
Oh, I got a whole lot of nothing for you, buddy.
Well, when are you gonna get your Spec Miata?
My Spec Miata? Oh, I don't know. When am I gonna get a truck to tow it and a trailer? The caddy pulls the bike just fine.
I'm sure the caddy could pull a Miata. Come on.
They could probably flat tow a Miata.
You could probably drive the Miata to the race. Just drive it as is.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it does. Miatas make terrible street cars.
They make great street cars, but when you turn them into a race car, it suddenly becomes a shitty street car.
Yeah, no. Whenever I drive, because I have a Stilo helmet that has like the built-in kind of earmuffs that really help cut down the sound. And I mean, any helmet's going to cut down the sound a bit, but whenever I drive the car around in the paddock, like after the race, or quickly checking if the steering wheel is straight, or something, just drive around real quick in the paddock, I'm always like, man, this thing is loud as hell. When it has no sound deadening, as the exhaust exit just like right under the the rear axle, and it's just like a tin can with a fart can on it.
Pretty much. The exhaust sounds horrible, and it resonates in the cabin. You can hear every rock those tires are throwing. Everything's like twanging and gross fart can sounds, and it sucks. No.
Yeah, and that with that 4.3 diff, if you're on the highway going 70 in that, you'd be like
that, dude.
5,000 RPMs or something.
Yeah, no way.
But it could be done. I haven't really seen it, and I wouldn't really recommend it, because you want to be confident in pushing your car if you do have an incident, or you break something. Now you can't get home, so
yep.
having the trailer is very nice for that. But I just, if you could do it with any race car, maybe you could do it with a Miata, but you would need one of those you need like a hitch receiver and a tire rack thing in order to bring your slicks and stuff.
Yeah. But or just really, you're already rolling the dice, keep rolling them. Driving the track on slicks.
Yeah, I remember I've seen some Champ Car teams do that, where if they're local, usually it's when they're local, right? They're not going to do like a 12-hour road trip, but like if they're kind of close, some of them will just drive it there. I mean, they'll have a backup plan and everything, but I think I've seen some Lemons teams do it too.
Yeah,
it's always fun to see, but yeah, definitely not recommended. But yeah, so I think that kind of covers it for this episode. A little shorter this week, but getting it out like a day late, but better late than never.
That's right.
So, yeah, as always, thanks again for listening in for this long, and we feel free to reach out to us on our social medias, of course, and give the podcast a follow on your favorite platform. But yeah, until next time, we look forward to chatting with you guys soon. So yeah, see you guys at the next one.
See ya.